So Gulia, Andy, and Lindsay proved that they could host a workshop and be funny and insightful and useful and practical. So I have no intention of proving that again this afternoon. But the title of this workshop is called Practical Strategies for Diagnosing, Testing, and Analyzing Conversion Rate Experiments. And I do hope it's something which is very practical and useful for you guys. Before we get started, I want to thank just two people that are here. One is Patrick Gilbert. Patrick, say hi. Patrick's the director of SEM at our company, and he's been instrumental in putting this together, and he also has a very good understanding of the topics that we're going to be covering. So later on tonight, or whenever it is, tomorrow, you can definitely catch up with Patrick to discuss anything. I also want to thank Gary Karras for coming, and Gary is the CEO of Karras Negotiating. He's the world leader in negotiating programs. Not only is he a client of ours, but he's also a dear friend. And if anybody would like to get a sense of the type of work, the quality of work we do for our clients, please do your very best to avoid speaking to Gary. My wife will probably not be so happy with me telling over this story, but a few months ago I was on the phone with a client, and as I'm sure you guys could relate, a lot of things come up during the day. I'm on the phone with my wife, I'm on the phone with clients, there's onboarding new team members, there's major issues that happen in client campaigns. So I'm on the phone with this client, and the client tells me at the end of the call, he's like, Isaac, let me know when you launch those new campaigns, let me know when the keywords were added to the ad group, and make sure to keep me posted about the conversion rate experiment you're running. So I respond, okay, love you, bye. And it was like, really awkward, true story. A few weeks later, I was on the phone with my wife in the middle of the day, and the only thing that's going on at work, my wife tells me, you gotta go to the store on the way home, you gotta get lima beans, kidney beans, I don't know what beans she wanted, then I had to go pick up the baby from playgroups. And she ends the call, and she's like, thanks, I love you, see you later. And I respond, no problem, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Which is, okay. So, all that's to say that it's important to be able to focus on the task at hand. It's a good skill to have. I don't really have it, but when it comes to marketing, there's a lot of different competencies, and we're going to talk about competency in a moment. There are a lot of different important competencies that you need in order to really sustain a successful and profitable marketing campaign. Most of you should have some handouts. I didn't print out enough booklets, but there are some of them circulating. There's also a digital version of the handout, and you could find that digital version and other resources at this link. You can go there now, you can go there later. There's also a 30-minute video on A/B testing with Google Optimize. It's a relatively new software from Google. I wanted to cover it today, but I'm not going to ultimately have enough time to really cover it, so I made a video last week just for you guys. You could download that video or I'll email you that video through a link on that landing page if you'd like to see that follow-up video. And there's a few other resources on that page as well. They're sort of supplemental to what we're going to talk about today. And there's also a version of the slides, and like I said, a digital version of the handout that's circulated. Just briefly, my name is Isaac Rudansky. I'm the founder of Adventure Media Group. We're a digital advertising agency based in New York. I teach a bunch of online courses, and I have a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology. This is my little guy, and this is an important picture because behind him, if you could see, there's a 70-foot billboard in Times Square that he's part of, and this is a client campaign. We don't do billboards, but a client called us late Friday afternoon and said, listen, Isaac, I took out billboards in Times Square, in Chicago, and LA. Do you do billboards? And I said, sure, I definitely do billboards. What do you need? And gave me the deadline. We had about 2 hours. We sat around the conference room table. The client sells sectionals and sofas, cheap furniture, sort of like a competitor to Bob's. Their name is Sofamania. And the idea was to put a cute kid on the couch and say, made with love on a Sofamania sectional. So it got very good feedback, and obviously I don't know all the legalities of using kids, so we just used mine, and he was very excited. He was very excited to come to Times Square and see himself up there. Okay, going into the very first practical takeaway of this workshop is the marketing competence matrix, and I've been involved with launching and sustaining and helping to launch many different marketing campaigns over the years, whether it be Facebook campaigns, SEO campaigns, all sorts of content campaigns. And I found, through my experience, that for virtually every campaign, you could sort of break down the core competencies that you and your team need into 3 categories. And this is very helpful. It really comes into handy. it's an invaluable resource if you're planning a campaign for you and your team. So you have declarative and procedural knowledge, knowing what exists, certain tools and techniques, and how to do them. Then there's salesmanship, and there's experimentation. We're going to be focusing today on experimentation, and I don't want to go into too much detail about all the different checkboxes and lists, because they'll vary by different campaigns. But if you'd like me to email you an actually like a dynamic version of this matrix, I think it's really helpful. We implement it in our agency when we're launching a new campaign for a client. It helps us see where we're lacking. Like we have, okay, we need to know these principles, we need to know them well, this is what's going to be important for this campaign. And once we figure out what's lacking, we're able to then go ahead and find the resources and the training and put the time in to what we really need to do to help the campaign succeed. And by the way, this matrix is moderated by consistency and hard work. Like one of the biggest failures I see in campaigns is shutting them down too soon. And the more time you put in towards getting better at these skills, understanding what skills you might be lacking, the more likely a campaign like this is going to succeed. But focusing on experimentation, Lindsay and Andy and Julia sort of spoke a little bit about these topics, and we're going to sort of follow along that same line with some practical ideas here. We're going to talk about diagnosing sort of tools and techniques to uncover opportunities on your landing pages and websites where you might be able to increase conversion rate, tools and techniques for actual testing and trying to find a better version of your page, of your content, and analysis tools and technique for how to communicate the results of a conversion rate experiment. If you've increased your conversion rate by 5%, what does that really mean for your business? And since we're going to be talking about experimentation fundamentally, I wanted to take a moment and talk about Claude Hopkins and his book, Scientific Advertising. I have 20 copies here, or 22 copies here, so, and I'm giving them out. So I'm going to try to end 5 minutes early. If you'd like a free copy, it's an excellent, excellent book. This book really inspired me to take experimentation and testing much more seriously. Claude Hopkins lived in the early 1900s. He was he's considered the true father of modern advertising, and he really invented the idea of A/B testing ads to generate more profitable results for his clients, and all of these experiments are detailed. It's a very small book. It's not a hard read. It's really, really worthwhile. David Ogilvy, is anybody familiar with Ogilvy? Ogilvy and Mather, so short. So people sort of considered Ogilvy to be the father of modern advertising, but Ogilvy's mentor was Claude Hopkins, and he said that nobody should be allowed to have anything to do with advertising until he or she has read this book 7 times. And anyway, so come up after, and I have like a few hard copies. Like Amazon only had 4 hardcover versions left, but the rest of them, but anyway, they're free, so. Okay. The idea of increasing conversion rate is very reflected in getting your design better. This really fundamentally comes down to improving design, and we experience bad design everywhere. And here's a video of bad design. I don't think there's any volume, but anyway, I'll sort of walk you through it. I was at a hotel a few years ago with my wife, and I go into the bathroom in the morning, very tired, and I'm trying to turn on the faucet. I don't know if you can see, but there's no handles. I was like spinning. I was spinning the actual faucet. I'm trying to find the handles, and I see the handles were in front of the sink, and it was a unbelievably terrible design. And I say that's bad design. That's an example of bad design. And the purpose of improving design is to make things easier and more pleasant to use. For websites, for landing pages, your conversion rate, the percentage of people that come to your site and take a revenue-generating action, your conversion rate, that's what's reflective of good design. So I don't think there's really much of a difference between the two things. Like making a design better, the way I sort of conceptualize that is for a landing page or for a website, it's increasing your conversion rate. That is they're sort of synonymous. And it's an interesting dichotomy because improving your conversion rate and testing your website is very easy. Out of all the competencies, it's the easiest thing to actually do. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It's not rocket science. You don't need to know a lot of mathematical formulas. And it doesn't take that much time. But yet, it's the thing that's done least. Like, we've worked with hundreds of clients over the years, and it's just very, very difficult to get buy-in. It's very difficult to get clients to change the way they communicate their message on the landing page. I don't know if anybody here has had similar experience, but they're like, okay, yeah, you can A/B test the ads, you can A/B test the Facebook post, you can do what you want here, what you want there, but it's like, wait, let's change what the homepage looks like, and it becomes a very uncomfortable conversation to have in most cases. But I'm hoping that some of what we talk about in the next few slides will help overcome those obstacles and will help you get more of that buy-in. It's definitely worked for us. I think it could work in many different environments. We hear a lot about the concept of clarity. It's a very well-known concept. People talk about it all the time. It's important to communicate your messages. It's important for people to understand what you do quickly and clearly, without being confused, without there being too much cognitive overload. We've also heard this idea, and Lindsay mentioned this. I think Lindsay's slides had 7 seconds, but 5 to 10 seconds. Right? We've all heard this idea. It's very, very important to communicate what you do within 5 to 10 seconds of a person landing on your website. So I was thinking about this, and my question was, who says? Where does this number come from? And I literally had this conversation with Gary Karras almost 4 years ago when I was trying to get him to test the website, and we ran that 5-second test, which we're going to go through together. And it's like, listen, you're not communicating on the website. You're not doing a very good job of communicating quickly. And Gary pushed back and said, well, who says you have to communicate quickly? If somebody's looking for a negotiating seminar, they'll stick around. And that was a really, really good question. And I think understanding the answer to this question, where this 5-second number comes from, will make you a much more persuasive marketer. So I did a little bit of digging a while back, and I found that research by Chow, Liu, and colleagues, this was done in 2010, from Microsoft Research, they set out to provide a mathematical analysis of user abandonment rates. It was a massive, massive study. They took around 206,000 different web pages and analyzed over 2 billion dwell times. And in human-computer interaction, this is an enormous amount of data. You don't see studies like this, that have this amount of information. And what they found was that time spent on site follows a Weibull distribution and the curve of the Weibull hazard function. Now, that's not really relevant. The Weibull hazard function was an engineering reliability concept used for factories to figure out at what point in time they were going to need to replace a part. That's what the Weibull hazard function was. And in this study, they just needing to replace a part with a user leaving the website. But more significantly, what they found was that 99.9% of web pages have a negative aging distribution effect. And this is very interesting because the assumption going into the study was that as the longer the time spent on the site, the more time a person spends on the page, the more likely they are to leave that page. Okay, I've been here for a long time, I've been here for 2 minutes. Now the probability of me leaving the site goes up. That was the assumption going into the study. What they found was that the exact opposite was true. So as time went on, the likelihood of a person leaving your site decreased. There was a much greater statistical probability of abandonment within the first 5 to 10 seconds than there was 120 seconds out. And this is what this looks like. This is what it looks like. Not bad. Plotted on the chart. So on the x-axis, we have time visiting the page so far in seconds. On the y-axis, probability of leaving the page right now. And this is what those first 5 to 10 seconds look like. Okay, there's a very steep drop from 5% down to 3% within the first 5 seconds. And then after that, after the very initial harsh judgment of 20 seconds, things start to level off. But what they found was that first 5 to 10 seconds was incredibly, incredibly important. The reason this was happening is that we have all become accustomed to websites being useless, right? Most websites we go to, most landing pages we go to, don't give us the information we want. They're not really good websites. They're either too expensive or too difficult to use or whatever it may be. And we've become trained to make very quick, harsh judgments very quickly. And this is not a guess. This is empirically proven by Chow and colleagues. And it's a very powerful thing to really know and to have this empirical, statistical analysis done behind it. Because now, you could approach your clients, or you could approach your own business, or your team, or your management. And instead of saying, hey, I think it's a good idea to test our landing page headline to increase clarity, to increase the effectiveness of our communication, you could say that intensive research from Microsoft shows that time on site follows a negative aging distribution of the Weibull hazard function analysis, and if we can communicate the value proposition within 5 to 10 seconds, it's a statistical certainty that will subsequently increase time on site and increase conversion rate. And that's a mouthful, and it's in the slide here, and you copy and paste it for your own purposes, wherever you like. Now that we understand and we can approach this idea of clarity and communication with a lot more sophistication, more intelligence, and there's empirical evidence for it, how do we actually diagnose for these conversion opportunities? And that's what brings us to the 5-second usability test. Is anybody familiar with the 5-second usability test? Okay, great. Only a few people. That's fantastic. So the 5-second usability test is the way to figure out if you're not communicate your message quickly if people who have been on the site are not able to understand what you do and the value you provide within those first 5 to 10 seconds. Now, this is a quick caveat. If you're a complicated business, then you can modify the 5-second test and do it as a 10-second test if you like. But anyway, so the 5-second test is where you show a picture or, like an image of usually your homepage, and I usually encourage you to test the first thing a person sees on the funnel towards a conversion or the last thing a person sees, and that's usually, in most of these 5-second tests, you're testing the top portion of a website, that hero section, or you're testing a landing page. You show them a screenshot for 5 seconds, you take that picture away, and you ask the respondent, what do you think this company does? That's the most fundamental question you ask. If you'd like to probe a little bit further, you also ask them, what do you think makes them distinctly valuable and what sort of differentiates them from their competition? If you could communicate that within 5 to 10 seconds, you're doing an excellent job. So respondents, if you're communicating your message quickly, respondents should be able to communicate with relative accuracy what the company does and what value the company provides their customers. And we're going to do a 5-second test. This is a real test. This was done on Paris's original website a while back. And here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What does the company do? Wait, there's a slide. What does the company do? What value do they provide? Anyone want to take a guess? I said what they do. Well, was anyone listening at the beginning of the presentation? I literally said what Paris does. So they're a negotiating company. So what you do is once you get all those raw responses, and you want to have between 50 and 100 respondents, and we're going to use Usability Hub, we're going to launch a real live 5-second test together here in a minute. You bring all that data into Excel, right? So you have all the raw data in the responses column. Okay, this is what the respondents actually said. Then you create a new column in Excel, and you sort of categorize each response into one of 3 tags. I recommend not using more than 3 tags unless you have over 200 respondents, but I'll usually do something like exactly right, in the ballpark, and dead wrong. And having a categorization system like this allows you to now plot this data on a visualized chart to really get a sense of how well you're communicating your message. So, I think there were about 70 responses here. And this is what it looked like. So 54% of people were dead wrong. They had no idea. I think there was like 7 people who said that they sell pizza because there was that image, and then there was a few people that said they sell gasoline, and there was a bunch of in the ballpark, but 54% of people didn't know what they were doing, didn't know what the company does. Now, we made one simple edit to the homepage, and we added a headline. And this is what it looked like: the world leader in business negotiating training seminars. And they really are the world leader. They've trained almost all the Fortune 500 companies. So we made a variant test, and we asked 70 other people. I think it was 60 or 70 other people. You obviously have to make sure that to not pollute the data, you're asking 70 different people. And Usability Hub, which is this great software we're going to go through, allows you to do that. We brought the data back into Excel or into a Google Sheet. We use the same exact categorization. And be careful, there's this natural bias. You should really have 2 different people on your team make the categorizations for both of the variants, because if you do, like I did, I just put them all as exactly right, because I'm very biased for my variant to perform better. So have 2 different people on your team mark these, but no, I'm just kidding. This was not biased. We had a really good result. So 50% of people got it exactly right, 28% of people were just in the ballpark, and only 22% of respondents were completely wrong. Now this might not look like a enormous improvement in performance, but when you do the math, there's a 317% increase between the 2 variants in exactly right responses. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to now see a 370% increase in conversion rate. That's almost impossible to happen. What it does mean is that you will see an increase in time on site. And if you have a good product, and if you have a good funnel, and if you have good content, and you have a good price, so on and so forth, and lots of different things you need to do in order to get somebody to buy from you, you'll increase your sales, but you will increase time on site. One more example before we do a live test together. So this is a homepage of our website, and a little while back, I came up with this headline that I thought was fantastic. Salesmanship in pixels. I don't want to get into the details now, but Patrick could literally vouch for this. I sent a 6,000-word email explaining why this was such an incredible headline, where it comes back to. It goes back to Albert Lasker, who actually worked with Claude Hopkins, and there's a little bit back in the book, and what advertising really means, and what salesmanship really means, and what we do, and it's unbelievable. I thought it was the greatest thing. So I come in to work the next morning, and I thought everyone would be like, wow, Isaac, that's a brilliant headline. And it was a very lukewarm reaction from the team. And one of the new guys in the company came to me and said, hey, I don't think this is such a great headline. I was like, it's a great headline. You're new. I've been doing this for a long time. It's a fantastic headline. And he's like, well, it doesn't really mean anything to anybody. Like, it might mean a lot to you, but it doesn't really mean that much to anybody else. I said, people will read, and this and that, don't worry, it's a great headline. He said, well, you always advocate for testing, so let's test it. I have a better headline. So I said, okay, it's going to be a win in my column. And just to placate him, I said, okay, we'll run the test. So we ran the test, and did the same process. 36% of people, after seeing our hero section, that screenshot for 5 seconds, understood what we did. And we're not a complicated business. We're an advertising agency. It's not complex. So I said, okay, well, I guess it's really, really hard to write a good headline for this business. Maybe it was bad respondents or whatever it was, and tried to make a lot of different excuses. So then the new guy had a little bit of a better headline and something, digital advertising services. And I was like, okay, this is not going to be any better. We ran the test, and sure enough, we saw a significant increase in exactly right responses. So I obviously learned my lesson that beginner's luck does exist for this guy. I'm just kidding. It's really good to test, and you never know. And obviously, you become biased with things that you like. And this is sort of going back to the original problem. It's very hard for people to okay tests on their website. Now, this was a 53% increase in exactly right responses, and that might not seem significant, but I want to plot out on a graph exactly how this impacted our business. We've been doing A/B testing on our site for a long time. We do it for our clients, and it's really important. And we've seen an increase in leads coming from our site month over month without any increase in traffic. Now, this has not come just as a result of testing one headline. This comes from testing many different things, but it ultimately comes down to making our communication at every stage, at every web page, and we really focus on testing the top, like what a person originally sees when they first land, and not worry so much about the information that comes afterwards. It's important, but you have limited resources and time and energy for this stuff. So we have about 6,500 visitors a month to our website, and this is the trajectory of leads after testing for increased communication. And this is a non-trivial slope. Like, these are clients that earn good company revenue, and this is the same thing that happens in every company that increases their conversion rate. They earn more money. And it's so easy to do. It's not expensive, it's not time consuming. Like I said, we're going to do one right now together. Okay, so let's do a live usability test. Any volunteers for me to use their landing page or website for a live test by a show of hands? Okay, what's your name again?
Jennifer Lee.
Jennifer.
Central.
Ring Central.
Yeah, Clip.com.
Okay, Ring Central. It's a big company. So while I'm pulling up Ring Central, tell me what you do. Tell me what Ring Central does. Tell everybody.
So it's a communication platform for companies to use to make them more efficient and collaborate with their coworkers more easily. I specifically work on the Glip app, which is the team messaging portion.
Okay. Okay, so let's open up the home page for a second. I'm just going to change the display so I can
App.glip.com work.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I mess up the company?
Well, I work on Glip.com.
Glip.
So, yeah.
Okay, so let's see the formatting here. Okay, better, faster team collaboration, free. So that's the headline that I first see when I land on the page. Let's think. Chat file sharing and task management. So this is actually, I think, one of those situations where you could flip the headline and the subheadline and probably get really good results. Better, faster team collaboration can mean a lot of things, right? It could mean team building exercises. It could be like laser tag, team building exercises. It could be only video conferencing. It could be only text messaging. It could be conference room software. It could be something like Slack, right? It's not so obvious to me when I first read that headline what this is. And remember, to play devil's advocate, like the company would push back, but okay, we have a really good headline. Okay, but that's nice, but we know that remember, the Weibel-Heiser distribution, negative aging, people will make a very harsh judgment very, very quickly. And it's very hard to come back from there. So what I'm going to do in this situation is I'm going to take a screenshot of this page. Okay, and now we're going to edit this. I think what we should do is just switch around the subheadline and the headline and see if that gets us better results in the 5-second test. Now, while I do that, and this is if you haven't done this before by editing on the fly, you could use Google's Inspect tools, which is really cool to quickly make these types of changes. So I'm going to grab the subheadline, and we're going to paste that. Better, faster, team collaboration. Okay, so I'm going to take that out. Okay. Now I'll take another screenshot. So now we have the sub-headline as the headline, chat, file sharing, and task management to unlock your team's full potential. I think that's abundantly more clear. And we're going to take a screenshot of this. We're going to go to Usability Hub and create a test. Now, I'm running really low on time. I'm thinking that, let's see. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this test. In the handout that you guys have, there's a step-by-step instruction, like literally step-by-step how to run this in Usability Hub. I'm going to run this test, so I'm going to take 100 respondents for both variants. It's going to take at least 2 hours for the results to come in, but I'm around tonight, I'm around tomorrow. If you want me to email you these results, if you want to know what the results actually were, find me, and we'll definitely go over them together. So let's just go back and carry on a little bit here, just because we're running a little bit short on time. So that's a usability test, a 5-second test. I highly suggest you do them. The investment is very, very, very worth it. Here's a landing page of a client of ours that spends an enormous amount of resources on traffic acquisition through lots of different sorts of campaigns. They sell portable oxygen concentrators. This is their original landing page. And the client always told us that price is the most important thing. Customers only care about price. So we sort of said, okay. But over time, we said, well, maybe we should hold by our principle that we don't really trust the owners of the business to know what their customers really care about. So we conducted a survey. And in the resource link that you guys have, there's a link to a template for performing these sorts of surveys on any sort of customer-facing representatives of your company, whether it be lead gen or e-commerce. It's a very, very good diagnosis tool. It's very old-fashioned. We got on the phone with all of their sales reps. We interviewed them. Very simple. It was very effective also because the last question we asked them was, what are the most important factors to the customers that you hear of on the call? And none of them, well, some of them said price, but every one of them said the weight of the unit and the battery life of the unit, and those are two things that we never heard from the client. Like, they literally didn't say it. Like, there was always about price. And we said, okay, that's fantastic. It's really going to be really easy now to do a better job. So we made a new landing page, and we changed around a little bit oh, I'm not even in the presentation. Let's go here. I was like, where are the transitions? Where's my, look, I had the line draw. So now, lighter than ever with batteries that will last all day. Okay, so this had a very positive impact on conversion rate. And if you remember the first version of the page, like all the literature you read about form placement is the guy with the form above the fold. So their original form is above the fold. And that's sort of what we're always told to do. In our new landing page, the form is actually starting over here. This purple is the beginning of the form. It's below the fold. This had a significantly better conversion rate. It went from around 8% to 13.7% conversion rate. And that's sort of testing, right? This was an A/B test, and that's where the 30-minute video that you guys have comes in. There's a 30-minute video of how to run this A/B test using Google Optimize. I show you how to run two different types of tests. There's A/B tests, and there's also redirect tests. They're both useful tests to use. So we have a little bit of diagnosis, which is our surveys, 5-second tests. The video is going to teach you how to do a little bit of actual A/B testing. But now you need to be able to communicate the results of a conversion experiment. That's very important. You can't just say we increased conversion rate by 15%. That doesn't, well, it sounds good, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So there's ways to do this, and there's not, and again, it's not complicated. It's just a matter of formatting it. You have in the landing page link that I sent you that you guys have, and if you need that link again, just let me know. You have a version of this exact raw export for this company, but you also have another template that you can plug and play for any business. For any environment, either using your original and your new cost per conversion, or your original and new conversion rate. And the end of the handout, the last few pages of the handout, goes through 4 or 5 different scenarios that you would use this model to answer certain questions about a conversion rate experiment. So just in this version, and this is the original copy, and this is actual numbers. These are like the real results. So $58 of conversion was what we were paying on the original landing page. Because we increased the conversion rate, and we didn't increase the budget, the new landing page was generating conversions at $39. We were generating 150 conversions a day. So the model spits out everything else, including everything else down here, and we were able to communicate to our clients a couple different things. One is that in order to maintain the same amount of conversions, in order to maintain the same amount of leads, you are going to save $88,350 every single month. And that's something which is concrete. That's communicating a very strong financial impact in a conversion rate experiment. It really justifies the work. It also justifies to our clients like why they're paying for traffic acquisition, why they're paying for agencies, etc. Or you don't have to talk about it in the context of saving money on traffic acquisition. Say the client was like, okay, we're not necessarily looking to save money, we're happy to scale. So the model will also spit out how many additional conversions per day, per month, per year you'd be getting at the same cost per day, month, per year. So we can also come to the client and say, okay, because we've improved conversion rate, because we did a survey with your salespeople, we diagnosed conversion opportunities, we used testing software to actually run an A/B test and come up with a better landing page. We now could model exactly the impact that this has had, and we could be statistically sure, unless there's a calamity, something very, very strange happens, we could be very sure that you're going to get an additional 2,265 leads a month, and this is a really helpful model. I don't think a day goes by where I don't use this model that you guys all have access to in some way or another. It's very, very helpful. So just quickly review the takeaways. Actually, let's skip the takeaways. It's boring, and go through. I mean, you all know the takeaways. There's a lot of stuff, and thank you very much. I know that it's frustrating to test, but once you could come at it with a much more empirical approach, it's much more exciting. I hope it comes across that I'm excited about this stuff. I like testing. I like hearing about experiments that other people are running. So if you have run experiments, if you have any questions now about anything we covered, we could do like 5-6 minutes of questions. And also, anybody who wants a copy of the book, come up and grab a copy. So thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. Any questions or anybody wants the book? All right, I want to hand them out. Okay, I'll hand them out.
Hey, book over here.
Hardcover, it's all covered. Oh, questions, good, questions.
Let me get the questions.
Questions? Yeah, comments and stuff? What do you want me to do? Oh, okay, sure. So, does anybody have any questions or just, no one had questions?
Can we get a PowerPoint of the
Slides? The slides are in that link.
Yeah,
Did you get the link? Okay, so I'm going to, no problem. Not everyone remembers the link. It's adventurepbc.com/GMC, or send me an email.
Amazon, very cheap.
Yeah, that's right here. Here's my email address. Send me an email. I'll send you the slides. Okay. Anybody have any questions or any comments, any feedback, any criticism?
Hi.
Yes.
I'm a product designer. I was a little
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're part of the class.
it's okay. Yeah, I was making. I have a question about the 5-second usability test. So if the key metric,
One second. There's a question.
I have a question about the 5-second usability test. So if the key metric that you're trying to optimize for is time on site, because you said that can eventually lead to more conversions, why do you recommend using the 5-second test versus just analyzing time on site in something like Google Analytics?
Okay. So what's your name again?
Courtney.
Courtney. Courtney's asking a good question. Courtney's asking if we're ultimately trying to increase conversion rate, increase time on site, why sort of waste time going through all the 5-second tests? Just go and run the A/B tests, and you'll get. Is that your question?
Yeah.
So if you have like one landing page, right, and it's really obvious what you should test, then by all means skip the 5-second test, right? If it's a very linear campaign, you have one landing page. But let's say you have a big site and you have Facebook campaigns running, you have Google campaigns running, you have some SEO campaigns running, and there's 30 pages where people are coming in on the site, and you don't have the resources to do A/B tests on you don't have the resources to run 30 concurrent A/B tests. B, you don't necessarily know that you have a communication issue on all 30 of those pages. So that what the 5-second test allows you to do is very quickly and very cheaply, like within 30 minutes to an hour, and again, we're just going to run those tests now, it allows you to confidently say whether or not it's worth to now spend a month running an A/B test. Because it could take a month. If you're not getting thousands of visitors a day, it could take some time to actually get statistically relevant results from an A/B test. So okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Lightning round top 5 wins that you see happen over and over again from some of your landing page optimizations?
Sure. So, I told that's a great question. I totally left this out. People love to test colors and pictures and typography and font size and where the form is on the page. Button colors, gradients. Those things don't matter. It's very easy to write a blog post about how like green is like psychologically oriented towards money, and red is psychologically oriented towards warning, and that none of that stuff really moves the needle at all with testing for conversion rate. So testing, so don't spend your time making like weak tweaks to your landing pages. Change the fundamental way you speak to your customers. So copy, so headlines is definitely the number one. So headlines, the first thing you see on a page is number one. Okay? Are you communicating? It's always better. Almost 10 times out of 10, if you're optimizing a page, take the subheader and make it the header. Like that will always, because everyone likes to be very cute with the headline, but ultimately, and then they actually like, are much more clear in their subheadline. So headlines and just being clear, and if you could be funny and communicate what you do at the same time, then there's no reason not to. But if you don't sacrifice communicating clearly for the sake of humor. And then forms. Forms is a big, not the placement of the forms, but what you ask for in the form. So we've seen massive, massive results, or variance in the form fill rate depending on what you ask. Now, it's not always a simple thing to take out fields of the form, right? It's that getting a client to okay that is very difficult. But play around with that, like, and you could use that. You could do that with Google Optimize. You could A/B test forms, headlines, and then like there's like something called information architecture, which is the inverted pyramid of having like the really important factors of like the sales. This goes into salesmanship a little bit. Like what's really important to your visitors higher up on the page, and then move the lesser things sort of down the page. So play around with information architecture. So those are three things that I found. I don't want to take any more time. Thank you very much, everybody.